And Bill's backup DVD. Welcome. I'm Glenn Anderson with the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation. For nearly 27 years, this TV series has explored a wide variety of issues related to peace, social justice, economic justice, the environment, and nonviolent social change. We especially provide opportunities for the public to hear voices and viewpoints that are rarely heard in mainstream media. An inherent part of human consciousness is that we seek meaning and purpose for our lives. People who understand that their lives have meaning and purpose enjoy better mental health than those who do not. During World War II, the Nazis imprisoned Viktor Frankl in the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Viktor Frankl recognized that the prisoners who saw meaning and purpose for their lives were much more likely to survive than those who did not. He was a psychiatrist, and so when he was finally released, he developed his psychiatric treatment method to help people discover their lives' meaning. He wrote a powerful book about his experience called Man's Search for Meaning. Nowadays, the world is suffering again, not in the horrible way that the Holocaust caused sufferings, but people are suffering in different ways. Many people feel overwhelmed by endless wars, the powers of giant corporations, corrupt governments, serious damage to our environment and climate, and on and on. People know someplace in their guts that we're living in difficult times. Many people feel overwhelmed by the problems and even despair of solving them. Many people shrink down into lonely escapism. For this month, the TV program will feature 5 persons who have devoted a lot of time and effort to help our local community and the world around us. They've worked on a variety of issues, including peace, environment, human rights, and economics. They've organized a variety of activities, including some that are quite visionary and some that are very nitty-gritty practical. I'm delighted to welcome 5 local persons whom I respect very much. We have Lisa Smith, Chris Van Dalen, Paul Pickett, Jody Mackey, Bonnie Jacobs, and we've all you folks watching, and this will be a fun conversation despite the heavy difficulties that we are in. So I'm glad all you folks are here, and I'm glad we have people watching. Let's help the viewers understand just a little bit about where each of you is coming from and what you've been up to all these years. Could each of you summarize, starting with Bonnie, some of the things that you've been working on in the past or present? And we'll just work our way from Bonnie all the way through to Lisa.
Well, when I first came to town with children in elementary school and looking to learn about Olympia in a capital city, I got involved in children's activities and helping at school. I was a former school teacher. And with the League of Women Voters. Over the years, opportunities presented themselves and I was in a position where I could say yes. I would like to do that. I worked on lines at the crisis clinic, or was on the board of the Dispute Resolution Center in Thurston County. And I recognized how much, as all that's going on, it evolves, everything's cumulative. I became involved in environmental issues and locally parks and Friends of the Waterfront, which I'm currently the chairperson of now.
And we'll have a chance to explore more with Bonnie as the program progresses. Let's check in with Paul and see what you're up to and have been up to.
Okay, yeah. Well, I've been working for the state as an environmental engineer since the 80s, working on water pollution and water issues. I've been, for 11 years I was a PUD commissioner as an elected official, which was a water utility, so again, the water theme. I've been going to Central America, working on water projects down there. I was just in El Salvador in July. I've been teaching at the Evergreen State College, which has been really meaningful to work with students and kind of pass knowledge on to another generation. All kinds of, lots of little things. I've got grandchildren coming into the world I'm spending time with, and so it's been really full. And it's been a long, kind of building process, opportunities that came along. We'll talk about that as we go along.
Right. Thanks, Paul. Jody.
Well, 17 years ago, I started working at a fair trade store after getting really inspired by how much difference to hundreds or thousands of people a place like Traditions makes, to people all over the world, community all over the world. And through Traditions, I found out about anti-war things, local environmental issues. I found out about some kids in Afghanistan through an event that happened at Traditions, the Afghan Peace Volunteers, and I've been there twice in the last 2 years to be with them as they develop a peace movement in Afghanistan. I went to Pakistan to work on ending drones as an instrument of war. So those are the main things.
Yeah, great, thanks. Chris.
Well, as a teenager just out of college, or just out of high school, I got involved in forest activist work in the East Coast, and both from like sitting in logging roads and protesting specific old growth logging projects, and then I worked in Washington D.C. as a lobbyist, and we brought a bunch of forest activists to D.C. But the more I worked on issues in that kind of charged political atmosphere, I realized that the politics is not the answer. We really needed to change the economics of the situation if we ever hope to really protect our forests. So I came and started working with dislocated timber workers, doing watershed restoration and rural economic development around alternatives to with the alternatives within the forest products economy. And then later on kind of shifted my focus into promoting and educating around green building and sustainable practices and developing our economy and our society.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Lisa.
Well, I've really been fortunate to be able to use my gifts in different ways, and I guess a pivotal time was being an AFS student, American Field Service. It's an exchange program, and I went to Denmark, and I realized there that there's another perspective on the U.S. and that I have to pay attention to politics and where I am. I went to college, and then I was able to work in the House and the Senate, Washington, D.C. for a couple of years. And then I really got into citizen-driven initiatives and very much enjoyed working with the Lung Association, got involved in the anti-smoking world, and then I became involved in finding some balance with the tobacco companies, kind of more of an activist. And then that brought me more into the area of results, which is a hunger lobby. And so citizen activism from an economic standpoint or a political standpoint is really exciting for me. Mm-hmm. And then later started Enterprise for Equity.
Yeah, and we'll explore that
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
Chris, you've got a story about from when you were 6 years old and things kind of clicked for you. Tell us that story.
Well, I just remember waking up one morning out of bed, kind of startled by a dream that I had had, where I was just standing in front of a crowd of people, and it wasn't just a crowd, it was all the people in the world, and I was telling them how to save the world. And it just, I don't know where it came from, but it surprised me, and, it's always stuck with me. I can remember it still. And so that's just, I think I just kind of feel lucky in my life that I got a glimpse of purpose and meaning early in my life so that I've been able to follow that.
It's amazing to have that that kind of an awakening at the age of 6.
Yeah, I know, it was great.
Ooh. Bonnie, when we were preparing for the program, you mentioned some things in your childhood that helped connect you with human need.
I grew up in Massachusetts back in the time when there were a lot of strikes going on, strikes for paper mills, woolen mills. And my parents took a very active role in providing food and clothing for strikers' families. Wow. And you're young and you're being talked to about people who need things that we can provide. And it's just stuck with me. A bit later on, I was in 18, a bit later on, my mother died. With my mother dying, it affected me in different ways, but one in particular was that things happen that you have absolutely no control over, that can shatter life as you know it. And that happens to a lot of people. We don't know their stories, but it builds up in you I don't know whether it's a compassion or cutting people slack, is how I often put it, that life is what it is. And if you can help make it better in the short term or the long term, for me that's very meaningful for me to use my life in that way.
Yeah. Do other folks have stories from your origins, like from when you were young, that helped you connect in some way, or things?
I had I kind of think it was a turning point in my life because I was a teenager. I got very cynical. It was like the Vietnam era, and it just felt like, the Cold War. And I just had this feeling like things were just going down the tubes. And I came to the West Coast, and I ended up out in the mountains, living in a cabin, and I just wanted to be like self-sufficient and get away from and be out of circulation. And it was a fascinating time, and yet it was not fulfilling. It was beautiful and it was fun, but it was also, I was getting depressed and it was difficult. And I remember going to visit my brother, and he said, it's like you just can't live your life assuming the worst thing's going to happen. And I got thinking about that. And then at the time, there was a local group getting organized because they had proposed a strip mine on a mountain, a salmon stream. And I started going to the group, and I started getting involved with this anti-strip mine group. And I just felt like, it's like I can go out and do this. Like, this is something I can do. I can work on environmental issues. I can work on the water issues. There's something I can do in this world to help prevent bad things or fix things that are broken. And at that point, I went back to school and decided it was time to, the first step seemed to be like, get a degree, get the tools I could use to kind of carry forth, trying to do good things like that.
Jody, you have a transition story from your time in the Air Force.
I was raised by 2 Air Force officers, and then I spent 6 years in. When I was in for 5 years, I had a new job. And that job, we would deploy, and I would be a security police augmentee. And I realized that something in me had shifted. I didn't know when it happened, except when I realized that I would be telling them I'd carry a weapon and that I would use it in whatever circumstances, and that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I'd been a mouse. I was a mouse. I had a little voice. I didn't stand up for myself like this. And it felt easy to stand up and say, you guys should know I'm not going to use this weapon. I'll go become an EMT on my own time and go out into the field with you and act as medical personnel. And I felt really strong about that for a long time. So I started conscientious objector paperwork and ended up not needing it. I got out soon enough after that, and I was shifted to a job where I didn't carry a weapon. But it was a time where I found out that I had a voice.
Other transition stories?
That's huge. And so I think for me, those times in my life when I've reached that crisis, like my parents dying when I was in my early 20s, or I was in this really what I thought was a really cool fight with the tobacco companies. We were helping little cities around Sacramento go smoke-free. They were going. I helped LA go smoke-free, and New York City go smoke-free, and I was all about being smoke-free, and we did some research and got it published, and then I was sued. And, with the university as well, and it absolutely took the carpet out.
The stuffing out of you.
Yeah, and I didn't have a footing or a framework to figure out how to get up again. And that was enough to have me, take stock and go back and reflect and find my path. And I think, having really good friends, if you don't have good friends, learn how to make good friends, because those are the ones who help you through. And of course, an incredible husband. But I'll just say that crisis can be a very powerful thing, because for me, and I know for some people, if we can get the support we need, then we can become resilient. And through resilience comes compassion, and with compassion comes action, I think.
Absolutely.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of the transitions came from being inspired by other people and ideas that came to me, and then I would find myself staying up all night just thinking through all the ideas that had come to me, and then that, would set the path for me for the next 5 or 6 years. It would happen that way.
Yeah. When I was in college, Nixon and the head of the draft came up, the head of the Selective Service came up with this lottery scheme as a way to, draw your birthdays out of a bin and to do the sequence. And the idea from them was when a lot of guys would find that they're going to be a low priority to get drafted, they would drop out of the peace movement, because after all, it wasn't them. So that was their scheme. And also it was to get rid of some of the arbitrariness and abuses. Well, out of 366 days in the year I was born, I was number 5, which was a very high. Those first numbers were going to go immediately. And after graduating from college, I went into a theological seminary and had a 2D classification, which was safe. I realized that my theology was way to the left of where the church was, and it would not be fair to inflict myself upon the church, believing as I did. And so I left the theological seminary knowing, and gave up my 2D classification, knowing that my lottery number had long since passed, and so I applied for conscientious objector status. I knew I was a conscientious objector from long before, but the way the regulations work, that was you don't apply until you actually needed it. And at that point, it became either the draft board would recognize the legitimacy of my conscientious objector claim, or else they wouldn't, in which case I was already going to be gone. So it was an interesting thing to wrestle with. I still have the same conscientious objector beliefs, but that's a powerful thing to wrestle with. I knew who I was, and fortunately the draft board recognized that, and so that worked out. So I mean, that's a transition
Totally.
that still makes a difference and has a legacy. Let's spend some more time with each of the guests in sequence, from Bonnie and Paul and on down the line, and hear some more about summarizing some more of the issues and activities you worked on and over the years, and what meanings you derived from those for your life. And I mean, each of us had said some of this at the outset, but here's a chance to get some more into it, and then the other guests will have a chance to add to the conversation as we move.
Well, I was an at-home mom for 10 years or more. So I had an opportunity to respond to, as I said, opportunities that arise. A friend that said, you really I think you'd learn a lot and enjoy such and such, the crisis clinic training and working. And I thought, well, I can do that. And in many ways, the things you get involved in are cumulative. You learn something new. You feel more confident. You're learning about your community, whatever area you go into, and that leads to the next, okay, I can do that. And so you become president of the board, or you start doing outreach, and Glenn invites you to be on television, and you go, oh, I can do that. And I think for me, there's the part about learning and growing, my own personal growth, being involved in something that is future-oriented for not just me and mine, but trying to open up an identification that is more than just me and mine. It's the community. It's not just my children, it's all the children. Yeah. And the third is you feel like you've made a difference, whether it's a small one or medium, or it's big for you, however it plays out on the planet. And then there's the friends that you make. I have friends that go back from working on heartfelt issues. When you really care with all of your heart, you make a friendship that lasts generations. I mean, I'm getting old now, so I speak with authority on this. Friends that I still have lunch with, or couples that get together for dinner that worked in Beyond War, which was a peace movement back in the 90s, or worked on in the Dispute Resolution Center. And when you think, I did the best I could, and it worked out. And then there's luck involved. There's a little bit of luck too. That I have my health, and there you go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds satisfying. Though, as you tell the story, it sounds like you've derived satisfaction. So you've had really win-win situations all the way around for the.
Well, sometimes you win some and you lose some. But yeah, it feels as though I've been true to my values, and I've done at least. I've helped a little bit along the way, because you can get mired into it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. No, it's really the worst of times, and you can't. I don't want to stay there. I want to keep active.
Great, good stuff.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's so many issues being raised here. It's fascinating. I don't know where to start because it's. I think we're talking about. I mean, sometimes it's like a roller coaster. I mean, you just keep going. Something revives you, and then you feel like you hit the wall, but then you get revived. And it's just. I think there's a certain kind of write it out when you hit the low spots. The idea of kind of meaning. And you talked about meaning and purpose at the beginning, and I think those are really linked. It's kind of like meaning suggests there's like a purpose to your life, but I think also that comes with that is empowerment in the sense of that you can do something, that you have the power to do something. Because I think if you don't feel there's a meaning, then I think there's a tendency to start feeling powerless, and so that all links together. And I think that. Meaning can come in a lot of ways. I'm just thinking, for some people, they find meaning through religion. Hearing the conversation, I was thinking, the environmental issues were meaningful to me. But then I went to college and I met my wife, and we've been married for almost 30 years now. And it's just that is incredibly meaningful. I've raised 3 children. I've got grandchildren now. And that's part of it. That's part of it is, the issue and the idealism of the issue is part of it, but the people it affects. And when you think of the next generation, you think of people, or just putting yourself in someone's place somewhere else. I mean, what is it like to live in the third world? What is it like to live in Afghanistan or Central America or even in this country where, or in other times? I think that empathy is really important to realize there's people out there. If you have something that's been given to you, you have privilege, you have an opportunity, you have talents that were given you to give that back to the world. My father was a minister, so I had that ethic as growing up of just serving the community and serving people and helping people. My brother was a conscientious objector. Watched him go through that challenge. So it's interesting. Those things kind of add up after a while. You kind of go, it's important to give back to the world in just whatever capacity you're given to do that. And some people aren't in that capacity. Like I said, some people just have their life blow up, and they're just struggling to keep their head above water. And so, it's all of that fits together. I think that's all part of finding meaning.
Yeah, it seems like you and Bonnie have both done things in a number of realms, a number of settings, because you come at things from a scientific background and dealing with water issues, and you've also done labor work, supporting workers'
Sure,
rights.
yeah.
and
Although I feel
movements.
my world is narrow. I mean, there's so much in the world, but and yet it's just wherever you are. I mean, that's kind of there's, like they say, think globally, act locally, and I think, act personally. I mean, your own life has a set of, you've been given tools and talents and passions, and there's a gazillion things you can do in the world, so you don't have to worry about all of them. You kind of worry about the things where you care about it and you can make a difference, and just focus on that.
One of the fun things about selecting this combination of guests was that each of you has done a variety of different things, and we've got in our community, we've got so many people who've done
Incredible.
so many
Yeah.
interesting things and wide-ranging things. So
You could do 50 panels.
we could do another program like this with a different set of people, but and an equally wide range of concerns. Do we have any thoughts or follow-up from either Paul or Bonnie?
What did you get out of going to Nicaragua? And what did you do there?
It's interesting. I've been to Ecuador, I've been to Nicaragua, I've been to El Salvador twice. And I think the most powerful thing and disturbing is to see people who are living on very little. And I think the image I have in Nicaragua is the family I was staying with, they were cooking over a wood fire. The women were washing clothes by hand in a sink. The bathroom was an outhouse out in the yard. I mean, life was very simple, and yet they had the TV on, and they would sit and watch TV, and there'd be ads for soap or dishes or something, and the beautiful gleaming house with the dishwasher and all the appliances. So they were there watching that world. And here I come from America, spending more money on the airfare than they probably earn in 6 months. It was very, very weird. I grapple with it. Every time I go, I still grapple with it. Suddenly you realize, there's a whole nother world out there, and people have a whole different background, and they just look at what's going on in our country, in our lives, and I just realize we live in privilege. We live in unbelievable privilege. And yet at the same time, why it's not fair. I mean, I think everybody should have the basic needs of life met. I mean, it's very, that I think is so disturbing, and that always is kind of the central thing. And at the same time, people are people, and they're happy, and they have parties, and they have families, and it's just amazing. I heard once a report where they said they were looking at depression rates around the country, and they said depression is usually correlated with poverty, except not in Latin America. Which is, I just said people they don't like the poverty. They've been fighting to change it, and yet they still can go out and have a good time. And the kids, they get clean clothes for their kids and send them to school, and they're just trying to do the best they can with what they got. So it's pretty amazing.
Jody, I wonder if you can share some information about activities you've been doing and values and meaning and stuff.
Well, here I came out of the military, and I didn't keep that powerful voice except in that situation. I came out of Mouse and went to Evergreen and studied science and got into fair trade, and eventually I started giving speeches about, as my role as a vet, and how I was working on peace, and how we could all work for peace, and why we would do that. And so I talked about these in one speech, about these different situations. Czechoslovakia, that lived for 1,500 years without war, and Crete lived for 1,500 years without war, even though they had metal and the war raged around them. We talk about how war is part of our genetics or something, but it's not. There are lots of communities that have lived this way without violence. And I grew up, I was almost deaf till I was about 3.5. And when I had the surgery and it gave me my hearing, I wasn't related to my voice in a way that gave me a pleasant singing voice. So I was always told not to sing, don't sing. And Right, so I had lots of fear around it. But I really wanted to get the crowd to sing Ain't Gonna Study War No More. So I'm at home sobbing on the ground before I do this. And I call up my boss and he says, don't worry, Holly Gwynn Graham will be there. She's at all of these things. Go on up. And, and I went up there and I didn't even look for her. And I go up to the top and I give this speech, and it was a good speech, but I don't get down and I tell them why I'm afraid to do this. And people get up and they sing with me on the stage. I was so scared that when I got down, I had pulled out my back and I couldn't breathe out of this side. I mean, but to be that scared and to do it anyway, it's just, it makes me really happy to think about doing that. Like what, and to have the support of community. That's what, okay, here's another thing is, I did a seminar with a whole bunch of people, and in this seminar, someone got up and the leader said, you really love people, don't you? And she said that she did. Yes, I do. And I was sitting there shy and wrapped up in myself, and I ended up knowing that I wanted to be that way. I wanted to love everyone and feel it coursing through my body. And so I get to step into that more and more as I do this peace work and see people be courageous and stand in the way of wrong. And I also I got arrested in Washington, D.C. the first time I got arrested. And it was during a major peace movement. I got arrested with 270 people in front of the White House. And I was one of the last to get on the buses because most people walked on, but a few of us got carried. I was one of those. And so I ended up with these amazing women on the bus with me, handcuffed for 10 hours. I was there with Medea Benjamin. She has a voice like mine. It doesn't usually lead the choir, right? Except for 10 hours, she led us in union songs and gospel songs and labor songs. And we had great relations with the guards. And it was this and people from this community came out just to support me while I did that. And it's this beautiful time in my life, right? Getting arrested. I've had lots of fun getting arrested. So, have you had fun getting arrested, Chris? And so the next day somebody says, okay, what are you going to do in Olympia? Why don't you do a fast? So I said, okay, that was fun. We'll do a fast. I'd never done a fast before. So I did a 7-day water fast on the Capitol steps, morning, right, sunrise to sunset. This person who didn't have a voice, but I'm talking to people who agree with me, who don't agree with me. We're asking the governor to demand the return of the National Guard troops who do not belong fighting foreign wars. They don't have the training, they don't have the supplies. They're needed here for the natural disasters. It's not what they signed up for. You don't mind if I hold your hand? And it does, it makes me happy to talk to people who agree with me, and they're sitting on the steps. And I went to vigil many other days that year. I got to talk to people who don't agree with me, and I got to figure out how to love them anyway and stand in the presence of their disagreement with me, which I can't always fall into, but it's one of the things we get out of this work is learning how to talk to people who don't agree with us, be in their presence so they actually feel our hearts and or our wisdom and love them anyway. And so a lot of what I've gotten out of this work is how to be with people, how to be inspired by people, and how to stand for what I believe in.
Good stuff.
Really?
Thank you.
Yeah, I can follow right on that because I grew up in a timber community in Oregon as a young child and through high school, but then went back east and learned what was happening to our forests. So I got really energized as an activist. And, and my colleagues were, villainizing loggers. I can remember a speech that one activist gave where he called loggers rapists. And then I went and got involved with Earth First and went and sat in a logging road, and I was arrested. And in the whole process, I kept talking with these loggers whose jobs I was interrupting. And then I was taken off to jail, and I got to talk with the the guard who was also a logger from time to time, and then I met this wonderful, beautiful woman who's no longer with us, Judy Berry, and she took me out to meet some of her logger buddies, and I got to realize that these people were real people. And in fact, logging the forest out was not in their best interest, and they actually knew that. And so then I got to go later on, after being a forest activist for many years, I got to go and work with dislocated timber workers who had changed their jobs because they lost their jobs, but then they started working in the woods doing watershed restoration and putting up fences to keep cattle out of stream, and they just loved it. And I realized that they know more about the forest than any of us environmentalists. And so I got to work side by side with these guys, and it meant so much to them to be giving back after they had, been a part of this exploitive, destructive industry, for them to have the opportunity to kind of restore and they cared about the salmon because they hunt, they fished, their children played in the woods, and so they cared about it like I cared about it, and maybe even more than I cared about it. And so I got to open up my mind to this polarization that we experience all the time, that people are either for or against, it's black or white, and I got to realizing that really there's certain values that we all share, and that if we can focus on those areas that common ground and build on that, then all the things that we disagree about become much less important. And so for me, a lot of my work as an activist has been to transcend my own value, my own position, and to find, what's the connection that I have with the person who I think is my adversary, and then build a coalition, build a common sense of purpose. I worked with Paul about 10 years ago on the Thurston Blue-Green Alliance, where we got the labor environmentalists together.
I knew we'd work together.
To work on that.
So long ago.
It was a while ago. Well, it's been 10 years since we had we organized a community forum on the fate of the Tumwater Brewery.
Oh, yeah.
And we had the Labor and Environmental Coalition that put that together, and we and it was unfortunately they didn't do anything about it at the time because.
But I have the tapes from that, and I gave it to Tom Oliva, who's a city councilman now,
So
and
never
it got
know.
fed into the new process.
You never know what's going to happen.
It went on down the road.
Even if you win some, you lose some. You might have lose this one, but you actually might have won it
Right.
because you don't get to
Plant a
see
seed.
You planted a seed that later takes fruit, takes root and
Or a pine
grows.
cone.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have a very similar story. I shared about my troubles with fighting big business and how difficult that was, and I had to heal from that because I didn't like business really of any kind that was going to be exploitive or whatever. And so I went through that process of really realizing the power that we have as individuals is huge. And I could fight all that I want out there, but when we build our capacity as a community or as individuals and work together to find that common ground, things things are easier and they're more effective and they're more long-term. That's what I think. Whoa, I hit that mic. So what I was going to say is that in this process of healing for me, I have grown to really, really, really like business. And for some of my friends, that's not such a kind of little bit of a bad word, because business sometimes just means exploitation or profit or unyielding whatever. But what truly inspires me about the work I get to do with Enterprise for Equity is see, what happens when a business is profitable and they have an environmental consciousness, like they pay attention to their waste or what kind of energy they're using or how they're treating their workers. And then guess what? They're profitable when that bottom line is actually higher. I mean, they have a better profitability when they're doing the right thing. Now, I don't know about you, but I like going to businesses like that. I like paying my money. I like, like the Olympia Food Co-op, for example. I like paying my money there because that gives me more of that. So the entrepreneurs that have gone through our program.
Tell us about what the program, for people who don't know what Enterprise for Equity is.
It's a small nonprofit. We serve Thurston, Mason, Lewis, Pacific, and Grays Harbor. And all we do day in and day out is help people with limited income start businesses. And we happen to attract these business owners who don't just want to do a job, don't just want to start any business. They want a business that's going to do good for the world. They're going to use recycled materials, or they're going to farm organically, or they're going to process food from local farms, or they're going to be a web design company that solely prints all of their materials at local print shops with, locally sourced paper from Grace Harbor or whatever. There's an overwhelming number of people who want to make money doing the right thing in a business. And I think, I suspect that if we were to help businesses become greener, become more sustainable, build in that bottom line for waste reduction or energy efficiency or, all those things, it actually is fun. It's fun to do your business. It's fun to hire people, and people want to come to your business. You become more profitable. Guess what? You hire more people. And guess what happens? They pay taxes, and then we have enough money to support our communities. So I don't think we can get there without a really strong business base.
I think it's really good, the work that you do, Lisa, because there's a lot of people who don't have a lot of meaning because they get stuck in a job that doesn't have any sense of purpose for them.
Right.
And I think we would all be so much richer if everyone knew what they wanted to do, was supported to discover their inherent gift, what they love to do, and then were empowered to do that for their livelihood.
Whether it's in a job or a business.
Whether it's in a job or a business,
Exactly.
and that's part of what you do. It's not the only way to find meaning, but it's unfortunately so many people don't have that opportunity to do what they love.
And how do you figure it out? So that I had this period of time in my life where it was just a desert. I had all these skills. I was smart. I could do anything, but I didn't know if it was the right thing or how I would manifest it. And I wish I had better tools. But now I know there's professional life coaches. You can go to WorkSource, and they have planning programs so you can learn about what you want to do better. You can go to Voice or the Timberland Library, and there's a whole section on jobs and meaningful jobs, careers. And you can take interest assessments for free. Go to your library on the...
You have a program coming up here pretty soon.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Can I plug that program?
Oh, please.
Yeah, so we did a program way back in September that talks about dependable strengths. And it's a workshop for job seekers, job counselors, entrepreneurs. And basically, it's an opportunity for 2 days to look back in your life where you've shined. And pay attention to those things in your past that you love to do, you're good at, and then package it in a way that it's easy to talk about in very specific terms so an employer can find you faster, or you can tell an employer more quickly what you want to do, or find that job that's really great. So it's, February 22nd and 23rd. Check our website, just make sure that it's the right date. But it's really for anybody who wants to come. It's not based on income. Anybody can come. We also do financial education classes for anybody. It's not income-based.
And that's enterpriseforequity.org.
Yes, and www.enterpriseforequity.org.
How convenient that the website is the
Yeah,
same name as the
it's
organization.
a long thing to type in, but
But once you got it memorized, you're all set.
it's pretty good.
Yeah. Beyond the things that you've said, you've shared a lot of rich things. Are there some other things that you've learned as lessons over the years that keep you working productively, even though there may be ups or downs or roller coasters or various metaphors that you've said, but for the long-term haul that you all been on here, are there some lessons that you've learned or insights you've gained that keep you plugging away even when we have struggles and frustrations and disappointments?
Well, I think you need to get started. You start somewhere.
Yeah.
For me, the starting happened to be kids in elementary school, the League of Women Voters. And I found what I enjoyed, what made me feel as though I was accomplishing something. And as I say, an opportunity would present itself. In the early 80s, they had decided to close the outdoor school program at the Olympia school system. Well, I had taught school, I'd been involved in PTA, And here was this opportunity that presented itself, so I coordinated that effort throughout the elementary schools in Olympia. And so you get started and you don't really know where you will go with the next step. And so you, I guess, think about where you are at the time, and I'm talking now about volunteer activities. Where are you looking for a job? Yeah. Are you looking for, are your talents in coaching a ball team? Not my talents at all. Could never coach a ball team. And then start somewhere. And things do present themselves that maybe you have to say no to. Maybe you can't now, but maybe you can tuck it in the back of your mind. You know, in 4 or 5 years, I think my life situation will be such. And that would be one point I'd make.
So it's what you're inspired by and hang out with who you're inspired by too.
Mm-hmm.
So Kathy Kelly and the Afghan Peace Volunteers in Afghanistan inspire me every day that I stop to look at them.
Yeah.
You know, who is it that inspires you and be there?
And I got very lucky and got hired by the Washington State Human Rights Commission and did a training program that took me around the state on the civil rights laws of the state of Washington and national civil rights laws for employers. And it was one of the most, and that was luck. But I was kind of ready because of some of the volunteer things I'd done or where else I'd worked in the state. So I got hired. And it was one of the most enriching, rewarding jobs that I'd had since teaching school. And
so could that be trust what shows up in front of you?
That's sort of the way I've moved. It wasn't really a plan, but it was like
Well, could I,
a little bit of
could I
luck.
pin something to that?
Do it.
So I really like the idea of that open door, but I want to do a plug for fear, and I want to do a plug for getting connected with your gut. So I know that sounds weird, but I have a sense, and just talking with so many people, if we are listening to our inner being, our inner peace, then that's like the best check. And then when a door opens and there's a peace inside, then is an opportunity. But often fear comes in the way. And fear, honestly, is a very awkward thing. I
had a friend address that very issue. And he said, you know, every so often you just have to put yourself in a vice. And you'll be scared to death, and you'll do it, and you'll find out you're just fine.
Exactly what
excuse me.
No, but that's exactly what I was going to say. That if there's a little bit of fear involved in going through that door, and your gut's saying it's the right thing, and it looks like you're inspired by it, or it's interesting, that's when, take a friend and go through that door with them. Or
there's a lot
I wanted
of
to add on to
things.
that.
Good, it's your turn.
Well, I think finding a community is such a part of it. So it's kind of like all of this is good, and then, but it's because I often tell people, and when I get to talk, I'll say, pick one thing. But the other thing is working with a community, and like Martin Luther King, now he's like a holiday, and we all think like of that one man, but he was an organizer. I mean, he started just as a minister who saw a problem and decided to work on it, but he was an organizer. He organized people. The civil rights movement was all these people working together, and he was a leader and a spokesman. We live in a society where, because of television and advertising, they're trying to make people feel like you find meaning through what you own or how you look. And I think it creates this alienation where people go, that doesn't make meaning for me. I mean, we live in a culture that's trying very hard to get people to be the atomized consumer, just breaking up communities, the book about bowling, I forget the name of that book where they
Bowling
said
Alone.
Bowling Alone, right. It's like they're breaking up the social network. And I always try to direct people back to that. It's like, find someone who's doing that. I mean, pick one thing or follow your passion, But then find a group that's doing that and get involved with them. You're not the first person to ever think of this idea.
Totally.
Find somebody else who's doing it, because then you can deal with the fear when you're in that community and everybody's going like, yeah, we're all scared,
Yeah.
but we're all working together to do this. And you're not alone. And I think that's just really important. I mean, I struggle with this all the time. It's like, get organized, get with a group of people, and work together with a community of people.
I think one of the things that is really ironic and inspiring about all this is that, for us as middle-income white Americans, I struggle with despair, and not just fear, but just the sense of like, the world's going to hell. But I may not have complete control over that, but I have control in the way I respond. And I know that if I choose to believe in a world that is whole and complete and sustainable, then it's so much more likely to happen than if I just resign myself to the despair. So for me, just try to choose to just move through that despair is really self-empowering. But I try to think about it, like, what if I was, living in a small village in India? People there have the same issues, but in much higher odds, much more difficult situations, and yet they keep going. So if they can keep doing it, then me with my little problems, I think I can keep, I can overcome that despair as well.
And there's also something of like being a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you see yourself as a loser, if you see yourself as somebody who can't do anything, then you will act in ways that make you powerless. If you see yourself, on the other hand, as somebody who is capable, who can actually fix things, change things for the better, then you'll act in ways consistent with that self-image, and you will become more effective in fixing things, changing things, making things better. So
it's a conscious choice.
It is at some level, and so that's part of what it is. And even if the odds are against us statistically,
right,
there's still some small chance that we can fix things.
What is it, Margaret Mead? Never doubt that a small group of dedicated
it's
people.
that kind of thing. And so if you work the right attitude, you can provide some leverage.
Well, and I'll just add one more thing. What I have just been amazed by, every single person, without exception, that have come through our program, or people I've met on the street, or in Egypt, or in South America, is that every single person has genius. Mm-hmm. Without exception. There's no exception. And that's the trick. Can I acknowledge my own genius? And can we do our best to support people in finding their genius? That is fun stuff.
Yeah. When we were preparing for the program, and Paul, we were talking on the phone, you mentioned this wonderful quotation from the Dalai Lama, and I wanted to squeeze that in.
I'm glad you're going to read it, because
well, the Dalai Lama said, "Let us reflect on what is truly of value in life, what gives meaning to our lives, and set our priorities on the basis of that." So there's that awareness of what's important, what the priorities are, and then that decision to actually act on it. And you've added that thing about recognizing that bit of genius in each person, including ourselves, but also the people that we otherwise might want to speak disparagingly of or cast aside. And so we need to pay attention.
I was just thinking the same, I was thinking slightly different words, just everyone has something to offer. If they just want to do something, then it's a question of just finding what it is, that talent they have that they can offer, and it may just being able to listen.
Well, and we in our community, when I see people who are not engaged or don't have a job and want a job, so I suffer. Our whole community suffers when that person, our community, is not engaged meaningfully in what they want to do. How do we create the society or the community where that's easy?
Yeah. And the thing that you said just a moment ago about each person has something to offer is actually a part of the closing that I end every show with, which we'll do in just a moment. But before we end, I want to just lift up some of these great nonprofit organizations that you folks are involved with. The Northwest Eco Building Guild, and the Eco House where you have a base of operations for for promoting green building practices. And then you're part of that wonderful corner at 9th and Adams with the commons at Fertile Ground that tries to be a resource for the community, just like a block south of the library.
It's really, really to demonstrate what a sustainable economy looks like.
And a community, a
Yeah.
hub for the community.
Right.
And then your Enterprise for Equity and we'll have the
Yeah, yeah.
websites for all
Sure.
these, but Enterprise for Equity is a chance for people to connect and get on their own feet in ways that appreciate their full humanity and their potential to be self-supporting in these little businesses that otherwise would not exist.
And become future
Yeah,
employers.
so we have those, and Jody, you're active with not only with Veterans for Peace, which has the local Rachel Corrie chapter number 109, but also connected with the Afghan Peace Volunteers, and you've been there to Afghanistan and met with the young folks. You're active with Friends of the Waterfront that's been doing great work for a number of years trying to
Well,
affirm the community values of having a waterfront for all of us and not just
one thing I was thinking about was when right when my husband and I both retired, the city council at the time decided they would sell the Percival Landing Park, where the play equipment is. And I did wait for someone else to do it because I had some travel agendas on. You know, you're retired, you're ready to get in the car, and no one stepped forward. And I said, we can't sell the only 2 pieces of property the city owns on the waterfront. We need it for a park. So sometimes you just respond as, again, that what presents itself.
Yes.
yeah. And I want to put in a plug for EcoViva, which is www.eco-viva.org that you've done some great work with in
Yeah, they're the group that I went to El Salvador with
Yeah.
3 years ago, and then again this last summer. And again, the courage of people who walked past tanks to get to their land and now are trying to build themselves out of poverty is remarkable.
So I just want to wrap things up. I know you
fine.
got
No, you're
one
good.
to do,
You're
but
okay.
we're
You're good.
tight on time. I want to thank all the panel members. I want to thank the folks who've been watching. We are living in hard times, but the experience we have from these folks and their wisdom and their energies and their shared insights show that we actually can turn around the problems that we're facing, and we would actually be happier as people if we did productive things. If we saw what needed to be done and you just get out and do it, preferably with another group like you're recommending, or even on your own, just get out
Start
and do
up
it.
a group.
Do it. You can get information about a wide variety of issues that relate to peace and social justice and nonviolence through the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation. We are all one human family. We all share one planet. We can make the world a better place, but we all have to work at it. And the world needs what you uniquely have to offer. Thanks.